Originally, this video this week was going to be on the new Risk of Rain 2 DLC. However, considering the amount of bugs and glitches and clearly rushed nature of this DLC, I cannot in good conscience make a video promoting it at this time. So wait till those bugs are fixed and then you'll see a video of me talking about everything that this DLC has to offer. Thank you. Now, I know this might be a shocking thing to hear, but the company that makes Steam used to make video games. And they used to make some really damn good video games. Stuff like Half-Life, Team Fortress 2, Portals 1 and 2. Hell, they even made Dota, which I am told by people who like those types of games is a good game. Now, that's not going to get me to play Dota, but weirder things have happened. And of course, the magnum opus of competitive esports history, Counter-Strike. Yes, that's right. There was a time when Valve would make games. Unfortunately, that time has long since passed. Or has it? Because Valve's newest game has officially been revealed. So join us for this week's Meaty Monday, where we finally get to talk about something positive for a change. Game where the only negatives are that I don't have enough hours in the day to play as much of it as I'd like to, and a game that made me, staunch MOBA hater, actually like a MOBA. Sorry, had to throw up in my mouth a little bit there. So this week we're going to be talking about Deadlock. Now, Deadlock is a fascinating game because usually games, especially from extremely prominent developers like Valve, will take their time, build and hype around a game. Maybe 5 years out from launch, they'll do a shitty CGI cutscene of stuff that definitely won't be in the game. Then maybe a couple years later, they'll do it again, and then by the time you see the actual finished product, it looks absolutely nothing like the original stuff. Valve didn't do this for this game. They just pretended they weren't making a game and just didn't say anything about it. No cinematics, no trailers, no nothing. All the while, they were secretly sending out a bunch of player invite codes for people to play this game under the condition that they do not talk about playing this game. Then those players invited their friends, which invited their friends and their friends and their friends, and all of a sudden, Deadlock is nearing 100,000 players before it's officially released.
That's so fucking stupid.
So by the time it does release, to the shock of no one, this game exploded in popularity. And for good reason. Deadlock is some of the most addicting, fun, exciting, novel, and innovative games I have ever played. It takes the shop complexity, hero designs, micro-macro mechanics from games like League of Legends and Dota. It takes third-person shooting at its absolute pinnacle, combines that with the Source engine to make the game run like butter, but also have all those silly movement jank stuff that can only happen in a Source game, and it just meshes them all together until it really truly does feel like an innovative step for the MOBA genre. You know how like Halo was that leaping off point for console shooters? I feel like this is really the leaping off point of MOBAs to become more mainstream. That's not to say that MOBAs aren't already massive. They are. But this is the game that gets your coworker who knows nothing about games to start talking about MOBAs. This truly does feel like a landmark event to play this game, and I've seen plenty of people write it off. Hell, even I wrote it off my first time playing it, but that's because you gotta go into it with a bit of an open mind. So let me open your mind up a little bit with this. I'm gonna give you some tips to make your first time playing Deadlock not as miserable as mine was, and to sort of understand the game a bit better as you go into it. This is not gonna be some super comprehensive micro-macro explaining video. This is just gonna be how to enjoy your first game of Deadlock, explained by an absolute MOBA noob, dumbass, person who does not play these games. Because I want to see you have fun with this game, assuming you're coming at it from a similar mindset. You don't need this video if you already play those games, but I mean, stick around, I could use the view count. But let's get into it. First thing you gotta know about Deadlock is this is a MOBA, but it is also a third-person shooter. So if you have a bunch of shooter skills, they will translate very well into Deadlock's shooting mechanics, which thankfully feel amazing. Whereas if you have a lot of MOBA skills, those will translate better into things like lane control, creeps, objectives, economy, when to fight, when to not fight. And then if you're somewhere like an Overwatch player, you're smack dab in the middle of these two. You already have the tools to understand a team fight and the tools to understand a shooter. You just need to learn the micro and macro of a MOBA and you're there. You've got all you need to play this game. Unfortunately for you, the micro and macro of this game is extremely off-putting to newer players. It will take you dozens of games to figure out what things do on your own. That's why the best way to play this game seems to almost be tied in with the way you get to play it, period, with a friend. So let me be your friend here and guide you through how to play this fucking game. The first thing you will see when you load into a game, or I guess before you load in, is the character select. You have to choose 3 characters that you are willing to play, and then the game will matchmake you. There can only be one of each character. You cannot switch your character, and the little green thumbs next to them mean these are good characters for newer players. There are not defined roles like DPS, tank, support, or designated junglers and stuff, just characters with their skill sets. Now you will be facing down against your opponents. The person directly across from you should have similar MMR to you. You may also be grouped with another player into a specific lane. This will be designated by the color surrounding your character borders on the top. You do not have to stay in this lane the whole time, but I highly recommend you do. There are 4 lanes in the map, each of which has a specific color, each of which is the responsibility of 1 or 2 players on your team, at least for the early. The later the game goes, the less this sort of matters of which lane you are supposed to hold. It becomes much more team fight dependent. So what do we do in a lane? Well, we're going to protect this thing called a guardian, and the way we do that is by stopping enemy little candle dudes called creeps from shooting it. If the little candle dudes are shooting it, the enemy can shoot it too. You do not want the enemy to shoot your dude, you want to shoot the enemy's dude. So how do we get to that point? So when we shoot the little candle dudes, they give us souls. They give us a bit of souls, and then we can shoot an orb that pops out of them for more souls. The enemy can also shoot this orb to get the more souls for themselves and stop us from getting it. So that's our basic gameplay loop that we're going to be doing for a while. Then we're going to use these souls in the shop. When we go to the shop, we can purchase upgrades. We can upgrade our weapon, our health, or our ability damage. That's what each of these colors mean. The more expensive the upgrade, the more powerful it tends to be, but the weak upgrades aren't anything to scoff at over here. Now, if you go into these things blind, it'll be really overwhelming. But if you click this funny little browse builds button right here, you can stumble on some amazing stuff like Flubber the Sequel, which basically just tell you which things you should upgrade first and sort of take all the thinking out of it so you can focus on learning every other aspect of the game. With time, you can maybe build your own builds or be so familiar with these perks that you can do this on your own. But if you are new to MOBAs as a concept, just go with Flubber the Sequel or whatever silly thing you find in the browse builds options for this. It'll be a lot more fun for you that way. So what you might notice here is we aren't really taking fights with these players. That's because we don't have our build yet. Flubber the Sequel, that shit's in pre-production right now. We can't be rolling out ticket sales yet. What we gotta do is we gotta play this smart and safe. Think about it kind of like a tank health bar in Overwatch. Your health bar is a resource here. Your creeps are a resource here. Your guardian is a resource here. All 3 of those things are stuff you should be balancing. You don't want to lose all of one, otherwise you'll lose all of all 3. So you're not going for kills right now. Sure, if they feed, kill them. But don't overextend yourself or overexert yourself to get one pick when getting them to low health at a point in the game where they don't have health regen is more than enough to get this same effect. Hell, sometimes it's even better. So now you know how to shop, now you know the basics of laning. What else do we need to know? Well, the next biggest thing is related to the shop and related to the lane, and it is your econ. Your economy compared to the other team is your main merit of how your team is doing. There are 2 important metrics for this. Number 1, your team's soul count. Number 2, each individual player's soul count. You have access to all of this information. So while you're balancing the resources of your health bar, enemy health bar, creeps, guardians, all this stuff, we're also balancing souls. Our biggest concern is the souls in our lane. We can press an advantage. It doesn't really matter if one of our dudes in pink lane is getting their shit pushed in. Sure, we can go help them once we've maybe taken out their guardian and established a foothold, but it's not our problem right now. It starts to become our problem when they start to hit the walkers, though. I also haven't really talked about character abilities that much. That's because this part is pretty simple. Every time you fill up this little orb down here, you get a new character ability point. You can use these ability points to unlock more abilities or to upgrade abilities you currently have. These get powered up by the purple things in the shop, and they're straightforward. You can get, again, an in-depth guide on which abilities to upgrade when, either by playing the game and figuring out yourself, or by using the good old Flubber 2 method of just browsing for whatever thing you find, and then using that one to tell you which order to upgrade it. Okay, I know that was a lot to take in there, but there's a bit more we gotta chuck on here. As the early game begins to wind to a close, things called jungles are going to start spawning. These basically have NPCs in them, and if you kill these NPCs, they give you souls. They respawn in various portions of the map, and they correspond to these little Dorito-shaped things on the map. A triangle is an easy one, a triangle with one line is a medium one, and a triangle with two lines is a hard one. Take these out if you have a bit of downtime, but honestly finding the balance between jungling and fighting in your lane and fighting enemy players and fighting objectives is sort of the big metagame portion of the game. Much like games like Valorant, Counter-Strike, and all the other MOBAs, you're really winning the game based on how well you can manage your economy. Unlike those games where points are sort of spent to give a slight power boost for one round, it is the cumulative power boost and the sort of arms race of upgrades we need to worry about. Now, the items you buy from the shop are going to go into slots. Slots for damage, slots for healing, slots for spirit. There are 4 extra slots, but these have to be unlocked. If you hover over these with your mouse, it will tell you how they are unlocked. Taking out walkers, taking out guardians, taking out base defenses, taking out a shrine, usually the way that you get them. They've changed a few times in the patch notes though. If you ran out of slots, don't worry, because you can just sell one of your earlier bought items and use that slot for a new item. But now that our build has started to come together, we understand the economy, we understand the resources at play, now we can really start the fights. Welcome to mid-game. This is the point where your walkers are starting to die, guardians are basically all gone, team fights are starting, the lane rolls are crumbling, and you gotta actually start using your kit that you've spent the last 10 or so minutes building up. There's not a set time for when this happens. There are a few new things we need to look out for. For the most part though, we've already covered 90% of the game. The rest of this is just implementing that with other stuff. Mid-game is also where you move on from fighting the guardians to fighting the walkers. Same song and dance as fighting the guardians, but they have more health, and you don't want to get close to them or they will laser beam you and stomp you, and the stomp will kill you. So keep your distance, let your creep soften. Another good way to know that it is mid-game is this is when the urn starts spawn, and also this thing called mid-boss, but we'll come back to that later. The urn is something that spawns on one end of the map and must be brought to the other, but while you're holding it, you can't use weapons. If you can collect the urn, you get a ton of souls. A good rule of thumb is to not put your teammate in a jelly cube after he gets the souls, because your dumbass forgot about the fact that you have to shoot the souls to get all of the souls from the urn. So don't do this. Alright, time to talk team fights. Say that 5 times fast. The most threatening people in a team fight, generally speaking, is the person with the most souls in that team fight. If you look right here, Vindicta has 11k souls, so she's going to be the scariest one. Target number 1. However, a lot of times you can't just go for the person with the most souls. There's going to be other people that are much more threatening, so they should be taken out first. Person who's most overextended, take them out. If you yourself are low on souls, you should play a little bit more cautiously and focus on supporting with your abilities more often. From a safe area with a lot of people around you or in the backline, you shouldn't really be taking risky fights. Anytime that a team fight is happening, you should try and be there. Anytime that it is obvious a team fight is going to lose, your team is going 2v6, 3v6, don't bother. They'll either have to run away on their own or they'll die. It is not your job to sink a shitload of time fighting losing battles rather than getting souls. Too many people try to participate in every single team fight, get themselves killed, and are sitting watching the respawn timer tick down for minutes on end, when you should be getting souls, managing your lane, and picking your battles. If you do this, you're also subconsciously telling your teammates that if they go for a risky play, you won't help them. This won't get through their thick skull, but in the odd chance, it might make someone play a bit more cautiously before they run into a 1v3 defeat again. I definitely won that fight. Just kidding, I used my super goo ball spin dash to get away and it was really silly. Remember that much like early game, winning a team fight does not mean getting a 6k. You can win team fights by surviving, you can win team fights by staggering people or picking them off later than you pick other people off so they have to wait longer and spawn or regroup slower, or you can win team fights the good old brute force way. The only time you're ever gonna need to brute force it though is in very specific circumstances. Now let's say you've listened to all that stuff and the mid game is going swimmingly. Well, now we get to the late game. When you'll know it's the late game is usually when people start passing about 20k in souls, when most of the walkers are gone, maybe some of the base defenses, which are the guardians again, but just near the base, are gone, and maybe you even lost a shrine. Or you go for your last ditch push up a lane to get rid of their last walker. The late game is basically when the game gets a lot quicker. Basically just team fights, the offhanded jungling while you're regenerating your health or waiting for teams to regroup, and most of your kit is already built aside from maybe some late game power spike items. Also, I'm shooting and breaking these crates and gold things because they can have permanent upgrades that are like little itty bitty micro buffs like fire rate, health, souls. Yeah, so break those when you see them. So this game is a bit of an older one, so I don't know all these amazing strategies that I'm sharing with you now while we watch this floundering here. But this is why you're watching this video, so you don't end up like me. So let's talk about what's happening now. Our lanes have had their shit pushed in. Their creeps are in our base. We have guardians that are our like last set of defense. They're dead. And they took out one of our shrines. What are shrines? Well, our main objective that if destroyed loses us the game is our patron. Our patron is invincible and can attack as long as one of the shrines is up. Now this team has already destroyed one of our shrines, so if the second shrine falls, they can damage our patron. If they damage our patron too much, it turns into a little ball right in front of our base, and if they destroy that little ball, we lose the game. So now that we've finished our defense part, we're going to start to push up, and now we get to talk about mid-boss. Now mid-boss is basically just a giant jungle enemy in the middle of the map. He's shown by this little gold thing, and if you kill him, you get something called a rejuvenator. If you get the rejuvenator, you get faster respawns. When the boss hits half health, it will release a roar like this. And when it is dead, a crystal will slowly float down from the boss, and you must heavy melee this in order to break it. You can parry someone else's melee with F, which will stun them. You can use your CC options to prevent people from picking this up, and you can sneak in and just win the team fight after they kill the boss and take it for yourself as well. Now, since we have the rejuvenator, we can basically do a no holds barred push on their spawn because we will respawn quick enough that it won't matter. This is why I saved this portion for late game as opposed to mid game, despite the fact that mid boss does spawn in mid game, because getting the rejuvenator late game is extremely important. Games can be won or lost based on which team takes out mid-boss and gets the rejuvenate. Now we're going to take out their last line of guardians, which allows our creeps to move into their base. You need to have creeps in the base if you want this to go smoothly, because it's basically the same rules as the walkers and the guardians before. Creeps are meat shields, they'll deal with the aggro from most of the base defenses, and they might even take the whole win if you let them go up uncontested. So taking out these guardians is very important. Now, because we've taken out the shrines, we can damage the patron. Once we've damaged it, again, it's going to go into the weakened ball state in the middle. And to damage it, you must be in the pit with the patron. If you kill the patron in the weakened state, you win the game. And it's just that easy. Now, I'm sure there's a lot that I missed or didn't go that much into detail on, but I feel like this is more than comprehensive enough for just sort of getting you into the game. You'll learn as you go, but if you know these very basic things, it will make it so that the game feels a lot more forgiving when you first start playing. I am by no means an expert on this stuff, but I do think this game is worth playing. It's really fun and very refreshing. Give it a try if you've got some friends who have it. If you don't have friends who have it, that's okay. We got a Discord. We can link you up with a code.
Ain't nothing like a phone, give me.